and welcome to our What's Your Story podcast. I'm Missy Day.
And I am Michelle Hausbeck.
And with us today is a longtime friend, John Lundell. Welcome to the show.
John.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So we have Michelle and I and John too, are part of a mastermind that meets once a month. And so we asked our friend John to come and join us on today's podcast. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his story. So I was thinking, so I've known you, so I wandered into BCN in September of 2013.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
you were the facilitator of that networking group. And so that's how we met.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happened since 2013?
Wow.
In 10 minutes. No.
Well, you know, I've essentially stayed in the workforce development and talent acquisition, talent preparation area since. But, you know, so prior to COVID, on through COVID, and recently spent most of my time in the recruiting space. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I'm at now. That's what I do day to day. And it's mostly with startups and early stage companies. And it's all over the board in terms of the type of talent on the tech side, as well as on operations and business and so forth. So, you know, it's an interesting area, and it's an area where I can spend time not only working, you know, with clients directly, but also using my background on the workforce development side to add something to the recruiting process. So I enjoy it, and it's going well. But, you know, we're always looking for new opportunities.
That's right. As entrepreneurs, we should be always looking for the next thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm John's accountability partner, so I happen to maybe know a little bit more than others. But there has been some recent developments of the universe, God, someone poking and prodding you to revive something that you did before COVID. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. In 2014 and 15, I put together my experiences working workforce development, but more specifically with people that are reentering the workforce, actually reentering life from a variety of things, such as incarceration, treatment programs, people with mental illness, people with homelessness, of course, as well as a variety of other disruptive situations that knock people out of the normal day-to-day. Mm-hmm. And so I worked with the Department of Corrections for a while. A number of years I worked with Salvation Army and managing their vocational training program there. So out of that experience, I wrote a book in 2014 or 15, and that is called Get Beyond Your Troubled Past. And so so that is there, it's out there. So all of you, you know, buy the book. It's on Amazon, has been for years. But it's now time, I think, to revise that and bring it up to speed, because a lot of things have happened. You know, we've had a lot of digitization, mm-hmm. you know, since 2015. Mm-hmm. So it's time to revise that. So, you know, over the last couple of months, I've been thinking about doing a second edition. And then a number of other things have come together, so maybe we'll do more than just a second edition. You know, we'll add other products to that. So I'm in the process of formulating that right now, and talking with Michelle about helping me on that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yay.
You used to go into prisons, didn't you, and speak?
Actually, I worked with the Department of Corrections at the Casa Grande reentry
right.
program. That was through a program at the time. It's changed, but at the time it was called Choices. And so yes, I worked there. It's right on Russell Road, and that's with prisoners that are reentering, you know, the workforce. They're on work release in most cases, getting ready for parole. Or in some cases, you know, the end of their sentence, you know. So that's, and it's kind of a throwback to some of the work that I did in the early years of my career back in the 70s, which I did some similar things. And so I took that experience and kind of expanded it and worked with the prison population, which was fascinating. And really was kind of the germination for the book.
Can you give us maybe a little tease or a couple tidbits of some of the lessons in the book, or You've shared a little bit with me. The one that particularly stands out, I believe it's in the past book, is, if you're exiting out of incarceration and you go to a job interview, how do you handle telling them, right, that you're going to have a convicted felony on your record? What point in time? I thought that was so fascinating.
Yeah, so, in the best of all situations, it's the best thing to do is to meet somebody in person, during the job application process, which is one of the things that's gotten more difficult, as the years have passed. But in any case, it should still be, I think, the objective is to be able to talk to someone. And by doing that, at some point early on in the process, after you've introduced yourself, again, recruiting and going out and finding a job in this whole area of developing oneself on a work site as well as getting a job, it's part of the sales process. So the first order of business is to introduce oneself, if possible, to that person, because the old adage is that people rarely buy things from people they don't like. So the idea is to make that decent impression and to connect up with another person and to start that process of, communicating person to person. Very early in the process, take that person aside, say, Mr. Johnson, there's something I need to say before we go too far with the process. I have a background issue, and so I don't want to waste your time. I really want the job, but I don't want to waste your time if there's something that will just completely eliminate me from this possibility. But if not, I want you to know that up front so that we can, continue on from there. Really important. The most difficult thing is to not mention it, as if it wasn't there. I mean, this is the age of digitization. So if you have any kind of blemish on your background and there's any kind of due diligence on the checking side, well, it'll pop right up.
Right.
And of course, you want to be out in front of that and say, Mr. Johnson, there's something I want to mention to you, so that that's not discovered. So that you can deliver it. I call it delivering the mail. So that you can deliver the mail on your terms and describe it and of course, truthfully. That's real important. So be straight up, be transparent, and tell that other individual what you want. And if they cannot help you, it's been my experience, in most cases, that they will say, I'm sorry, I can't do it because of the policies of our company. However, I appreciate the way you handle this. And I think that there's somebody that perhaps can help you. Let me get in touch with that person. I'll put you in touch with that person. So again, it's all about the approach. It's so important. And of course, that's the big issue when there's a big problem in one's background, is try to, the instinct is to avoid it, pretend it's not there, which of course is exactly the opposite of what one should do, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a lesson that can be learned not just if you were incarcerated or have a felony on your record, but if there's any issue that needs to be brought up, to be upfront about it, that might hinder you later down the
Absolutely.
process, and it could almost make you feel or make the employer feel as though you were hiding it and shady, and all of a sudden that trust is gone. Just say it up front.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's, reentry in this case is not only from incarceration, it's from all these different types of disruptive experiences that knock somebody off their previous path.
Right.
So it's regrouping, and it's coming up with a game plan and using strategy, of course, but also tactics. Open, honest, but realistic tactics to say, this is the situation that you're facing. What are the 2 or 3 different options that I have as how to handle that? And again, it's, as Michelle would say, I'm a process-oriented person, so it's all about the process. It's about defining the process for that individual and helping them progress from one step to the next. Again, it's like the sales process. Years ago, I worked a lot in sales training, and the question that I would ask people is always the same question. It's like, what is the objective of selling? I mean, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? And of course, the answers would be things like, of course, to get the sale, or to get to the close, all of those type. But the real objective, from my perspective as a process-oriented person, is always to get to the next step. So every sales process, in this case, if it's a job search process, again, it's a series of steps. First order of business is define the steps. and then move from one step to the next. So at any one point, what's your objective? If it's in sales, it's to get to the next step, which eventually lead to the end, to the close, a successful sale. If it's a job search, it's the same thing. It's to get to the next step in your particular process, and not to worry about that step 3, 4, 5 down the road. Just worry about this step and the next one coming and the next one coming. And just focus on the process and focus on doing those things within the process that is unique to each individual. If that's the case, in most cases, it works out quite well. And many times what will happen, just like with the example of the employer that says, geez, I can't hire you because of the policies of our company, but I do know somebody else. That happens all the time. And being transparent, going back to people that are coming out of prison, being transparent about that, one of the concerns is the fear of doing that. Introducing yourself and saying you got a felony. It's like, what are people going to say? It's been my experience that if you do it well, and if you're genuine in doing it, very, very seldom will anybody be unkind, blow you off, put you down for that. Very, very seldom. It's just, it's when it's one-on-one and you're genuine and you're straight up with people. 9 chances out of 10, if not, 99 out of 100, people will accept that. They may not be able to help you, but, you just move on to the next situation.
So a friend of the What's Your Story family is John Ponder, who is the CEO and founder of Hope for Prisoners. And I didn't know if maybe that would be something, you could partner, with them, because that's like their whole focus is they work with the prisoners and to get them out and then, re-enter into society. And I know that they have several companies that they work with to get them, but again, it's like they have so many people coming out now that it's hard when you've got 50 people that are out and trying to find, places for them.
It's always a challenge. It is always a challenge. And I'm familiar with John Ponder's program. Actually, I met John when I was with the Salvation Army, so, and I, saw him develop that whole program, which is very impressive. Yeah, indeed. But the key, I think, and where I intend to go with this new version of the book and the new materials related to that, is how to take this to a broader audience. Not only prisoners, but also homeless folks, also people coming out of, treatment. And again, anybody that's come out of that disruptive situation, what principles can be used by all groups that are common to all of them, and to help them re-enter life, re-enter the workforce and so forth. I mean, for most people, it's all about work. I mean, wouldn't it be nice, if that rainbow, just dropped a big bucket, but that's not the case for most people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and even with COVID, I know 2 people that have yet to leave their house because they're traumatized by COVID, being shut down, losing businesses. And then, if that's not realistic, you can't live in your home the rest of your life. You have to come out at some point, right?
Yeah, indeed.
So do you see, like, what your revision and everything, would that be something that would speak to them as well? Because I'm sure they're not the only 2 people in the world that's happened to.
Well, ironically, one of the concepts that I've used over the years relates to your story, and in my situation relating to helping people get back on track, it's getting beyond your story. So I use an example of, and again, this is very focused on just people reentering, but if you are incarcerated, your life is all about who? It's all about you. And I don't mean that in a shady way. I mean, that's just the reality. It's all about you, where you are now, what you've done, what's happened, what's your sentence when we get out, on and on and on. If you're in recovery and you're going through a recovery program, it's all about how you got here. It's all about your recovery. It's all about the process. So it's all about you. So one of the big things, regardless of which type of reentry person we're talking about, whether it's a prisoner or somebody coming out of treatment, you have to take your story and set it aside. It's real important, because my experience has been when people are so caught up with their story they can't do the work that they need to do to get to that, objective, which in my case is always one thing, to be self-sufficient. But not just self-sufficient, but sustainably self-sufficient.
Right.
So, you can be self-sufficient for a while, everything is great, and then life tumbles in again, and we crash down, and we need to depend on others, which is good, but again, as a process-oriented person, so you get to the end of the process and stay there. So, in terms of the person's story, one of the things that is important, I think, for workforce development people to do is to say, you're not that person's counselor or their therapist or their case manager. You're their workforce development person, whatever the title is, and your objective is to help them move down this process to get to the point where they're self-sufficient and they can stay there. So it's sustainability there at that point. And you have to set that story aside, especially when they're incredible stories, when, coming out of the prison system or out of homelessness and so forth. Unbelievable stories. Yes, I acknowledge that. But dwelling on the story at this point is counterproductive.
Well, it's on to the next chapter of the story,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And trying to help that person stay in the moment, stay present. It's not about the past, but very difficult to get away from that past. But for the moment, we have to set it aside. And it's also not about the future in the sense that there's a lot of anxiety. What's going to happen tomorrow? Oh, I don't know. I'm anxious. Set it aside. You focus today on the process, on what you're doing today. And when you're done with that, you go to the next step. The past will be dealt with, however it will be dealt with through your therapist or what have you, or your, your spiritual guide, whatever the situation is for you to get beyond your past issues. The key is to stay in the moment. Otherwise, it's been my experience that people just keep cycling through, and we don't make the kind of progress that you need.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I am so glad. Well, first of all, I'm glad that we reconnected, and I'm glad you're part of the mastermind.
Yes.
And
Me too. Thank you.
so if people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that? And tell them again about your book, too.
Okay, the name of the book is Get Beyond Your Troubled Past, and the best way to get in touch with me is through the book. It's Get Beyond Your. The website is Get Beyond It All. So it's getbeyonditall.com, and you can reach me there or right through Amazon. All of my information is there as well.
Awesome. So what do you do for fun, John Lundell?
What do I do for fun? Yeah, that's always a. Yeah. Well, John loves to swim, and he likes to read. I have this habit that I find a lot of people don't have. Is I read. I don't think it's a good thing, to be honest with you. I read like 6 or 8 books at one time. So it's like,
You know who else does
Michelle
that?
does that.
So does John Maxwell.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm like 3 or 4, but yeah, I always got books going.
Yeah,
So do you.
I just once in a while there'll be something, and I'll get to that point. I'm 3/4 through this book. Come on, let's get all the way through. But generally it's a lot of different things, and a lot of different interests, a lot of history books, certain degree self-help books, political things. So all over the map. I like to read a lot of stuff.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Very cool.
We should start
Yeah,
a book
John
club.
Maxwell talks about how, because people always ask him, how do you find the time to read all these things? And so he does this cool process where he has 2 stacks of 10. So these are what he calls just like browse. And then these are the ones he actually reads and takes notes and all that. So he'll just take one from the browse, flip through it. If he sees something that grabs his attention, he'll highlight it. So he goes through that pile. But then this is his pile that he actually reads. And I was like, I don't know, 20 is like a lot, even if
Yeah.
10 is just browsing.
It is. Yeah.
It is.
Well, for me, it's like peeling an onion because I'll read something and I'll go, that's really interesting. I wonder, and then here we go with another one. And not only do I sell my book on Amazon, but I've been an Amazon book buyer since, I don't know, maybe like 96 or 7, so Yeah, it's too easy, isn't it? You just go click,
Mm-hmm.
and it either arrives on the
Add to
Kindle or
cart.
arrives at home.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Well, it's been great having you. I hope you had a good time. And
Thank you.
thank you all for joining us. If you'd like more information about What's Your Story, you can go to our website, what'syourstory.vegas, find out all about our event that's coming up on October 13th and 14th at the Ahern Hotel. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.